Monday after the Ponca Powwow is such a sad day, knowing one has to tear down camp and return to the modern day drudgery of our normal routine of school and work. The camps already start to dwindle down Sunday. One's having to pack up and go home Sunday night. On Monday, the camps really start to disappear like a passing fog or mist. The sound of laughter, play, and joy becoming rare. The powwow blues kicking in as the campfires are out, and the Ponca powwow grounds go back to its normal state. The crew starts taking down the power and other things that make a modern-day powwow go wow. Kenny Johnson and his family packing up, going home. JT doing likewise, Laura and her boys being the last to leave. Laura with tears in her eyes, really feeling the powwow blues, talking about her dad, Silas Primo, and how he used to feel the day after the Ponca powwow. The Ponca powwow, in a way, a glimpse of paradise for the Ponca people, is a long drive back to the country. Jubal and Joe knowing they have to go back to school on Tuesday, curious what the new school year will be like and what they missed. Dreaded Tuesday, getting readjusted to the drudgery of the public school routine the night before the first day back to school was already stressful and exciting enough with the added on stress of missing the whole first week. Joe has a different time getting proper sleep, staying up late, watching Jay Leno headlines, his monologue and guests. Jay Leno used to do a skit on Mondays called Headlines, where people from all over America would send him funny headlines, typos, newspaper photos, misworded ads, and etc. It was something Joe looked forward to every week. He loved comedy and witnessing the audience reactions. Sometimes Joe would even stay up later watching Conan's antics. Usually after that, the basic antenna broadcasting would go to boring stuff on late night infomercials that Joe should not have been watching. It was a struggle getting to sleep. He had a funny sleeping habit where he would sleep on his back and turn his head left or right instead of sleeping on his side, feeling vulnerable because the closet was on one side of his bed and the window was on the other. He was paranoid something would jump out of the closet and his window was open with a box fan in it. Also avoiding sleeping in the dark. He would watch way too many scary television shows and movies, which caused him to have an extremely wild imagination. One of the movies that really scared him was Ernest Scared Stupid. It made Joe scared stupid. Besides that, he thought one time he woke up at night and seen a bird-type creature standing by the door. It was dark, had a face of a bird and the body of a human. It may have just been a nightmare that felt really real. Or maybe that old house on the hill had guests and visitors. Joe would really feel scared if he ever had to be alone in that old house that barely was livable. To say Joe was feeling anxious was an understatement. No telling who his new teacher will be, who will be in his class, what will the cafeteria serve. Hopefully not that smelly fish and funny tasting mac and cheese. Joe disliked the taste of fish and would trade it with another student. Will he miss the school bus? Will his classes be difficult? Will he have to deal with some rude children at recess? What clothes will he wear? Will others make fun of his camo shorts? Questions racing through a young Joe's mind. Waking up, dog tired, Joe's mom Laura doing her best to get him up and ready for the bus. Joe kept trying to go back to bed. She had ways to get things done, as George Washington said. Government is not reasonable, not eloquent. Government is force. If force she would have to use, force she would use. Joe trying to watch some cartoons before school, Transformers or something about made-up dinosaur drama. The bus down the hill, wearing its horns, time to go, barely making it to the door before the mayor Coyle, the school bus driver, a very old man, drives away with a schedule, quote-unquote, to keep. It is rainy and muddy. There goes trying to have clean shoes for the first day back. Joe usually sits down toward the back. The neighbors down the road, Benny is already seated, looking mean. Dad shoes horses, does substituting for Coyle, teaching science where he might blow something up doing a science experiment. Benny's mom does something that seems to make some decent money. Benny has a lot of material things, a portable CD player listening to boy bands and whatnot, a relatively rich kid who thinks he is better than non-white children. Joe kind of knows about Benny's dad's temper. Joe used to go visit Benny when Joe first moved in, but after he seen Ben's dad get angry and mean, he started avoiding going over. Joe was an introvert. Proximity and desperation does not guaranteed nor necessitate a friendship will be sparked. The bus ride is rather boring. Joe using the time to catch up on sleep. Though the bumpy country bus ride does not make that easy. No telling how many concussions Joe probably got from leaning his sleeping head against the window. And then old man Wilson hits a speed bump in Langston or a hole in the country hole, bouncing Joe's head hard against the window. Sometimes Wilson gives a heads up warning, though it did little. Wilson seemed to enjoy driving like a madman, causing the passenger children concussions. One of the new children on the route is Neil from Norman, a boy in Jubal's Winterhawk's grade class. He knows a lot of big city things and seems confident in outsmarting the small town country bumpkins at Coyle. Some familiar faces on the route are Claude and Maisha, whose mother is friends with Laura. They occasionally go over to Sharon's house and watch TGIF with Claude and Maisha. A strange sight on the outskirts of Langston is in Obelisk Park in the middle of a four-way section. Who put it there? That was just one of the mysteries. It was one of the last things passed before heading to Coyle Public Schools. Oh, the joy of being forced to go to school. Breakfast was donuts. One of Joe's favorite breakfasts the school served. Also, they let him have seconds, so for the day was going smooth. His buddy Mickey was there too, drawing while eating a donut. He lived a block away from the school, and his mom was a cafeteria lady. He was probably the most talented drawer in the class of not the school. He was named after the baseball great Mickey Mantle, not the rat. Joe got along with him just swell and was happy. They were in the same class. Most grades at Coyle were divided into two teachers, two classes. Joe's brother's grade only had one class. Joe was happy that he would get to have his buddy to fill him in on what happened so far. Joe: what has happened so far? Mickey: well, nothing much, just a reading contest this year with the winner getting a prize and a piece of reward system. Joe: anything else? Mickey: well, there is an environmental art contest coming up as well. Joe: you'll probably win that because you are the best drawer in class. Mickey: I drew some shoes. You want to see them? Mickey really liked drawing shoes for some reason and seemed to like shoe design and whatnot. He could really draw shoes. Early morning recess is usually brief or a little longer depending on how fast the bus driver done his route that morning. Usually there is one teacher to oversee the morning madness. There are swings, merry-go-rounds, a jungle gym, a basketball court, a field to play soccer on most of the time. The swings are occupied by swingers trying to swing to the moon, doing a full rotation around the swing set. Merry-go-round is usually parked with children holding on for dear life as ones push them around. This merry-go-round probably been there since the Great Depression era, causing the occasional visit to the hospital. One of the children flies off landing awkwardly, breaking a bone. Sometimes the teacher will push the merry-go-round and really get it going. One of the teachers works in the shop barn FFA building, whom is big and strong, is popular when he gets it going, making it feel like an amusement park ride, nothing like a spinning ruled feeling before being indoctrinated by the government school. Some children really know how to climb on a jungle gym. Others do not. Joe was not one who was a climber. The basketball was situated on rough asphalt, so if you fall down or get knocked over, you would end up getting a scrape. The school was very cheap and seemed to want children scraping themselves up playing basketball. School was known for having a decent basketball team. There are lots of black athletic students usually playing basketball. Joe was usually not a fan of how the bigger children would change rules every 10 seconds to rig the game. No unbiased refs. Joe getting called for traveling, reaching, goaltending. He liked basketball. He did not like rigged games. Sometimes the soccer game would be going on with faster children dominating. It was pretty much Thunderdome rule-wise, as most public schools experience bullying is common. One teacher watching usually meant there were blind spots that the children would exploit for fighting. Joe usually avoided fighting. Skipping rope was another activity with children knowing how to do a bunch of fancy rope tricks. There was a strange old-timey throw a ball over the roof tag game that was often played. Sometimes Joe would read or try doing his homework last minute. Joe was often procrastinating, doing his assignments last second on the playground, scribbling down sloppy responses. First hour class, an exciting round of math, taught by a teacher who barely knows how to add 2 plus 2. The class is taught by one teacher. Each subject taught by the same teacher. The only classes taught by someone else is art and physical education. Second hour is English, where teacher tells Joe about the reading contest. He missed hearing about it when he was at the powwow. She tells him that whomever in the class reads the most books will get a reward. The way she tells is a library test that determines if a student read a book by asking a series of questions on the computer. If a reader gets a score of 60% or better, they get points. At the end of the school year, the student with the most points wins. Also, so many points gets the student a personal pizza from a pizza restaurant that was well known for this. Joe felt fortunate he did not have Melissa Gilbert in his class, who would walk down the hallway reading. She would read in the car, while eating, while sleeping. Only that, she would ace the test. She got straight A's, was teacher pet, and was in the gifted and talented. One of the books she read was Gone with the Wind. To highlight her reading level, she was no average fifth grader. At the end of the day, if she was so smart, why did she not homeschool and graduate college at 11? Public schools are full of braggart parents. In Joe's class, the biggest competition was Andy, the superintendent's daughter. She was involved in about everything the school had to offer, from sports to academics, volunteering opportunities to student council. Her best friend was Melissa, even though they were in different classes. She was not the bookworm Melissa was, though she did read lots of books and pass lots of tests. If anything, being involved in so many activities was her biggest weakness. Her schedule was filled from the moment she awoke to the time she went to bed, whereas Joe was in a lower socioeconomic class, so to speak, not playing sports, not in student council, not volunteering. He could focus on reading as many books as he could, winning as many pizzas as he could, being only distracted by video games and television programming, a classic underdog story of a boy against a rigged school system. The third hour subject was history, which was Joe's favorite subject. His brother Winterhawk was a big history buff, and Joe pretty much looked to Winterhawk as his role model and basically did what his brother did. Winterhawk was always watching history documentaries on PBS. Channel 13 seemed to almost show one nightly Winterhawk quickly became a reservoir of historical knowledge. History was a subject both Winterhawk and Joe routinely got an A in. Joe really liked learning about American history, from George Washington, the U.S. Constitution, to World War II. Joe's grandpa Ernest was a World War II veteran. He became an Oklahoman farmer after the war, living out his days on a simple farm. Joe learned a lot of country ways from him, including milking a cow, feeding chickens. They always had fresh dairy milk to serve. Their home had that old-time country farm smell. Grandma Emma always having beans ready, taking care of her son Daniel, who loved tea. They also had a Chihuahua that scared Joe. The dog could sense fear and loved scaring Joe. Being around Grandpa Ernest probably helped Joe do well in history. He lived Oklahoma history. Fourth hour was physical education with Mr. Dunn, a middle-aged white man who had an accent from up north. Oftentimes he would plug in a tape of Richard Simmons having a class dancing to Dancing in the Street. It was an hour of jazzercising while he graded assignments or did something else. Another one of his go-tos was a weird Japanimation movie about a unicorn. Sometimes he would show a comedy. During basketball season, he would have the children practice basketball, calling the children, such as Joe, who would read their books or do their homework, bleacher creatures. An activity that was popular was dodgeball. Joe rarely won. It was the thrill of not being hit or surviving that Joe enjoyed. Joe, wearing glasses and not being the most athletic child, was an easy target for the skinny, fast children who could throw a dodgeball. It was strange having physical education right before recess, going for one setting of play to another setting of play. Another thing about dodgeball was it was usually played on Fridays, which made Friday physical education one of the most looked to classes of the week. Lunch and recess. For lunch, dreaded fish sticks with mac and cheese. At least Kyle was willing to trade some of his stuff for fish sticks. Kyle was a boy that was in the grade above but got held back at grade. He was friendly. His dad was harsh and mean at times. Kyle lived right across the street from the school, made it convenient for him in many ways. His family was in some kind of strange religious cult, and he was always practicing for some religious thing. Other than that, Joe got along with him just swell, trading often at lunch for food. Kyle was good friends with Winterhawk when Kyle was in his grade. Now that Kyle is in Joe's class, he gets along with Joe. Kyle reads a lot and is also in competition to win the reading contest. His religious activity is one of his weaknesses, and winning the contest taking up a lot of his after school time. During recess, Joe breaks out some of his trading cards of a certain popular Japanimation television show. Depending on the teacher watching recess, Joe was able to play a game or two. Joe became quite proficient at the game, going to a comic book shop, Stillwater, every week to compete against players of various skill levels and ages. Elder players were obviously the most difficult to compete against. Despite the stiff competition, Joe was able to win a full set of trainer badges. He loved the strategy of the game and was able to learn from the other players. Joe also watched every episode of the show, memorizing all the pocket monsters and characters. He played the Game Boy game over and over. He was a fanatic. He even had a book that listed the current trading value of each card. First edition and holograms were the most coveted. To protect them, there were sleeves to put them in. Joe was skilled at trading and could make a little extra money trading with rich kids for rare cards. One time Joe was at a store, had a sell of trading cards, and Joe was able to buy them extra cheap. He had a whole bunch of hologram cards and rare cards in the bundle, which he then went on to take to school to trade and sell. One kid bought a few of the cards with a lot of money. Later on, his folks complained, which resulted in the teacher telling Joe he was not to sell. or make money off trading cards. After that experience, Joe was very careful with whom he dealt with. It was also a learning lesson that public schools were not meant to help children become economically proficient. Instead, public schools are a means of controlling the population. Besides that, Joe made quick visits in the library during recess, checking out a few Hank the Cowdog books by Erickson. This was one of his favorite book series, and he read a few of them already, which helped Joe get some quick points added to his reading tally. Melissa was there as usual. The librarian was friendly and helpful. It was not a huge library. It had just popular children's books, some newer books. Joe had read a lot of books already. His favorites were funny books and adventure books. One of his favorite books was Where the Red Fern Grows, Summer of the Monkeys, Hatchet, Call of the Wild, Tom Sawyer, Huckleberry Finn. Pretty much any of the Goosebump books, though he usually read them during the day, surrounded by people. Some books were real popular. The library had only one copy, which meant checking regularly for a popular book and reading popular series somewhat out of order. It was a quaint little country school library. Fifth hour was math class, usually once a week for math. The class would get to go to the computer lab to mess around with some old computers that had a popular math racing game where the racer would answer math questions and buy cars and parts for a racing contest. More questions one would get right, the faster their car would be, which meant more winning. It had funny sound effects. Another game played was Oregon Trail, which was popular as well. It was a strategy game that involved getting from the east to the west as Oregon with a little wagon train. There was a lot of luck and choice involved. Your party could suffer all sorts of setbacks, such as broken wagons, typhoid fever, snake bites, drowning, getting killed, losing livestock, horses to make it safely involved, buying the right amount of supplies, experiencing the right amount of luck, choosing the right amount of floating equipment. It was a role-playing game teaching management skills. Joe really liked it. When they got to go to the computer lab, he did not have a computer like Benny did. There were only about 2 old computers in the classroom and one new fancy Mac. If the children were allowed to play with it, if they had the time. The Mac in the classroom had the internet and a fun dinosaur raptor game that was in 3D. During that time, the internet was still relatively young in the pre-Y2K era. It was super slow and there was not a whole lot of content like there is in 2025. Still, there were games that could be found on the internet. Again, Joe found it a blessing that his math class was computers that day. Mickey liked looking up shoes online. There was even a website where you could design your own shoes. Sixth hour was one of Joe's favorite classes, art and music. The teacher was an older woman, not the best art teacher in the world, one who would suffice though. Public schools, you get what you paid for. Some classes she would teach art. Some classes she would teach music. In regard to music, she was getting the class ready for the December end of semester concert, which was full of pagan songs about reindeers, fat old men in red suits, and snowy cold weather. On the art instruction side, she would have the students work on drawing, painting, and one of the things she was getting the students ready for an art environmental contest in October. Mickey won it 2 years in a row and was a favorite to win it again. It was a statewide contest that had to work go through various levels till it reached the state championship level. Mickey almost got there last year. One of the famous winners of the contest had a down that said, "Give a hoot, don't pollute." Catchy slogans and well-drawn art was key to winning. The teacher of the winning student was also rewarded with prestige and better job opportunities, becoming known as a teacher of a prize-winning elementary school artist. Therefore, the art teacher at Coyle was keen on trying to get a student to win it. Besides a cash reward, the contest also gets children programmed to be against littering and cleaning up the school grounds. Mickey loved drawing shoes as usual and was wanting to incorporate shoes into his entry. Joe was going to use a tree, a bird nest, some loggers. Joe got to sit beside both Mickey and Kyle in class watching Mickey draw his shoes. Like they say about birds of a feather flocking together, Joe, Kyle, and Mickey flocking together over their shared love of drawing and art. 7th hour. Science class, nothing spectacular. Teacher just promoting a bunch of facts out of book. Not really teaching critical thinking or questioning. If a student does question, that is results in basically an automatic D or F. Joe did like some of the graphs and photos in the science book, pictures of animals, nature, maybe a graph with a weird stat. Other than that, Joe did not excel in the public school science system. Joe, the last hour dragged on and on. Joe was just happy as can be. Class ended and he got to go home. On the bus ride home, Joe was doing his best to catch up on his back homework. Some of the country road happened to be real muddy that day, and the driver was in a rush. Most of the city children were already dropped off. The country roads outside of Coyle could get very muddy and were not graveled or maintained super well. Some roads were risky business. Driving on, still rain, snow, sleet, or shine, the bus had to risk it. And risk it the bus driver did. A lot of the children were sitting on the right side of the bus when all of a sudden the bus was tilted on the side of the road. The bus driver's solution was a simple one. Have all the children go to the left side of the bus. Somehow, some way this worked, and the bus was back on the road chugging along. The bus driver was happy it worked, and it didn't have to get a tow out of the muddy ditch, nor did they have to open the emergency hatch. Joe was taking a nap when this happened and thought it was kind of neat how they got out of the ditch. The children on this route had a somewhat adversarial relationship with this bus driver. The year before, Joe, along with a bunch of other children, got into the habit of jumping from seat to seat while it was moving. Joe and the other children did not think there was nothing wrong with this. The bus driver was drowning in displeasure, yelling at the children to sit down. Despite the persistent yelling, the children persisted in jumping seats. The bus driver's solution was simple. Go to the principal with the video. Joe was brought in with his mother to the principal's office, where the principal proceeded interrogating Joe over the matter. Joe denied it, then denied it some more, to which his mother, Laura, believed him. The principal then pulled out the television, VCR, and tape showing Joe hopping from seat like a frog or a turtle, poking his head up to see if the jumping is good. Laura kinda thought it was humorous, though she was somewhat upset. The principal then proceeded to sentence Joe to detention for a week, which meant being isolated in a room for an hour, missing recess, working on homework, or reading a book. Joe rarely went to detention, getting to see how it was in the detention with children who were always in. One of the children reported the bus driver getting stuck in a ditch, using the children to swing the bus out, which resulted in the bus driver getting rolled up. Maybe if the bus driver was more merciful with the seat jumping, he would not have gotten written up. Mercy is a beautiful thing. If you have opportunity to show mercy, do it. One of the ones that used to live was a small Chihuahua Terrier mix who they got from Terry, named Top Dog. He was small but had a lot of heart. Named after a Chuck Norris movie. Sadly, over the summer, he was out running around his route by the house, and he went missing. Laura searched all around to no avail. The next day he came hobbling home all wounded from what looked like coyote bites. Laura took Top Dog in to the veterinarian, who could do little for him, so the vet did the difficult job of euthanizing him. It was rather lonely coming home from school not knowing, having Top Dog to welcome Joe. Joe had a real lonesome feeling not having his friendly dog greeting like the previous school year. All they had was two cats, one named Mama Cat and Tabby, who hung around the run-down barn behind the house attempting to catch a field mouse. They were friendly enough to let Joe pet them, but they were definitely no dog. Joe, getting home, did this normal routine of watching cartoons, playing video games, and taking a nap, putting off doing his homework till the last minute. They lived a simple life, so there was not a lot of chores to do. Laura would get home and start supper and watch television. Laura worked at the cafeteria of Langston University and occasionally would bring home extra food and snacks from work. Joe would usually do a lot of reading during the evening when Laura was watching a show. There was a lot of comedy sitcoms and drama shows on television, nothing too exciting for a Tuesday. Wednesday went by, some stuff, different day. When Joe got home, he did his normal routine, except when Laura got home from work, went to Guthrie to run some errands. When they got home, it was slightly dark evening time. To their surprise, it seemed like a dog was hitched up by Laura's trailer shed, an old brown, 10-ish, medium-sized, stocky dog. They walked up to him, and he was as friendly as could be. He was neutered, not hostile in the slightest. Laura did not feel she could keep it, so she got Joe to get burger left over from the other day and had him lead him into the truck, take him down the road. It's not far down the road, and to Laura's surprise, he came back. Again, they gave him another burger, loaded him up, and took him further, taking him into Langston, where they thought for sure someone would want him and be able to take him in. They dropped him off and went home, figuring that it was solved. About an hour later, guess who shows up again? The same dog. This time, Laura decides to keep him, naming him Old Man. Old Man quickly becoming a faithful companion to welcome Laura, Winterhawk, and Joe home. In addition, fending off the coyotes of Hiawassee Road. Just getting into the hand-drum schedule of a new school year routine takes a little time. One of the things Joe looking forward to driving this time, as many school children, is Labor Day. Not necessarily for support of workers all over, but because it is the first day off of school for the year. Next day off was some kind of teacher day off in October. Sometimes for a small vacation of sorts, Laura would take the boys to Lake Carl Blackwell, a small muddy lake outside of Stillwater. To describe how dirty it was, Joe's uncle Mac was going through a divorce and was temporarily homeless a few years before. In his homeless state, he decided to camp out the Lake Carl Blackwell, eating, sleeping, and cleaning his clothes in the lake. One time, Mac was out there washing his clothes when he seen a boater on his boat doing his business off the side of the boat, and I do not mean urination. Mac, seeing what was happening while he was washing his clothes, then seen some turds floating down the lake his way, looking like candy bars. Besides this story of Mac's, there were Oklahoma State University and Langston with a college population. The lake had its shore of questionable material floating around, despite how dirty Lake Carl Blackwell was. It was the closest lake to them, and they liked to swim. The reward was worth the risk. They had a floatable boat that took a while to blow up, but now, since their pump was not working, it was not like the most durable boat neither, with sticks being able to puncture it easily. The repair kit helped some, but only lasted so long. There was a simple pavilion where they would eat their food on a picnic table. Laura managed to collect her loose change by a 2-liter of pop. It was a simple joy, but one does not need a feast to have a good time. One only needs a little love and determination to have a good time. Also, if you are having a good time at Lake Carl Blackwell, watch out for the turds. Joe continued in the pattern of laziness and reading whenever he could, knowing the more points meant more personal pan pizzas. He turned 11 in September with no big fanfare. Sometimes on the weekend, Laura would take her sons to a restaurant that served bigger chicken fried steaks that was across the street from the pizza place. That rewarded student readers. Joe would usually get one to go after eating a chicken fried steak. Joe definitely had a full belly his 5th grade year. One of the things Joe really enjoyed was renting VCR tapes from Mega Movies. They usually had rent one, get one free specials. Also, they had Nintendo 64 games to rent. One of the games Joe rented over and over was Command and Conquer. It was a strategy game. Given how much they spent renting it, it would have made more sense to have just bought a copy. Joe really liked the whole planning and strategizing campaigns, the feeling of crushing enemy with overwhelming force. It was a somewhat violent game with tech explosions, bullets flying, and people getting zapped to oblivion with laser obelisk. Thing about that era of renting was it was first come, first served. Sometimes a new movie was real popular, causing the consumer to wait weeks to rent it, with other people spoiling it if you had not seen it. New movies and games would usually come out Tuesday, so by Friday it was random chance if you would get a new release. DVDs were a relatively new thing in 1999. The DVD players were expensive and the selection was limited. VCRs were not as fine picture quality. One could not find a new movie to watch. There were floor movies for $1. There were comedy, action, drama, horror, sci-fi galore sections. Sometimes the reason Joe selected a horror was because it had R-rated stuff 11-year-olds should not be watching. Besides renting and playing video games, Joe loved reading and talking about video games. One of the magazines Joe read religiously was Electronic Gaming Monthly. He loved reading the reviews of video games, funny articles, descriptions of soon-to-be-released games, the photos of video games at school. These were highly sought after. An era long before YouTube and Twitch, where you had to have a physical magazine to learn about video games. This took time away from Joe reading books. Some of the popular movies before the year 2000 were. Meanwhile, Randy was involved in overachiever behavior of studying to get an A+ on every assignment and test, parties, putting in extracurricular activity available, pleasing her superintendent dad in whatever capacity she could. It was uncanny how Randy and her 2 older sisters looked just like their mother, with the same hairdo and clothing style. Her superintendent father wanted things that way just so to squeeze in her overachieving lifestyle. She would stay up late to get an A+ quality grade and then read some to try to win the reading contest. It was different. It was difficult to keep up with her best friend Melissa's pace of read. Again, Melissa would read when she was walking, talking, eating, and sleeping. Randy was not built that way, though she was an overachieving teacher's pet. To make children like this feel superior at rinky-dinky public schools like Coyle, they had a program called Gifted, where they got rewards and perks. They would get to go to special meetings, field trips, while the other children developed an inferiority complex. Timothy, Ben, Randy, wearing the Gifted and Talented program, were quick to remind the other children how stupid they were. could not be a part of this select group. Timothy would do so using mean, witty, sarcastic comments. Sound like they could have been written for a sitcom. Benny did so by being a typical bully like his dad, with the smug "I'm just better than you" attitude. Ben was not quite like in first grade, but his system made him this way, a little baby wasp, white Anglo-Saxon and Protestant. Randy did so by being stuck up most of the time, ignoring other students like they did not exist. Melissa did really do much to show superiority complex, though her mother, who was the same height, made it known. Her mother was over-involved, living academically vicariously through Melissa again. Oh, if Melissa's mother was so smart, why did she not just homeschool and graduate her super young? Why did she feel the need to use the other public school children as a dummy comparison group? There was a boy named Chris who was in the gifted program who seemed to be in there just so the parents of Timothy, Ben, Randy, and Melissa could say the system was not all rigged. Chris was down to earth and popular in class. Another one was a black child named Donald. He was just naturally arrogant. Also, Timothy, he loved Xena. His mom was a hippie cosplaying Renaissance woman who lived on in summer camp. Joe probably would have been a part of this group, but he was a natural slacker, doing the bare minimum on his homework and tests, missing the maximum allowable sick days each semester, playing video games long into the night, watching as many movies as he could, eating a bunch of junk food. Joe still got along with a lot of the gifted and talented children despite the superiority complex they had and were growing. Joe reading books like he did made him well read compared to a lot of other students. Joe not being a part of the gifted and talented program, eventually the social divide grew with each passing grade, class divide and class. The system putting the children against each other, dividing and conquering. One day, Joe went with his mom, Laura, to visit one of her co-worker friends. She got acquainted with recently a friendly older woman who worked at Langston for many years, Miss Holly, a well-respected pillar in the Langston area, known by many for her exceptional kindness. She made a good name for herself. She lived the outskirts of Langston with her cat Bebop, a gift from her son. She kind of looked like Cicely Tyson with wisdom in her eyes, modest in dress. She was pleased to meet Laura's son, Joe. One of the things Miss Holly taught Joe was something this. Miss Holly, well, Laura, hello. Is this your son you have been telling me about? Laura, yes, he is a little shy. Miss Holly, there ain't nothing. I was somewhat shy when I was young, too, Joe. Nice to meet you, Miss Holly. Joe got acquainted with her over time. Miss Holly telling Joe about Bebop and her son. Later on, she talked to Joe about the Bible. Miss Holly, do you know the name of the Son of God? Joe, Jesus Christ. Miss Holly, very good. Miss Holly, very good. Do you know the name of his father? Joe, I thought it was God. Miss Holly, well, let me show you in Psalms 83:18. She reads Psalms 83:18 to Joe. Miss Holly, did you notice what it said? Joe, it said Jehovah was his name. Miss Holly, that is correct. Do you know what Jehovah means? Joe, what? Miss Holly, it means he causes to become. Jehovah can become whatever he needs to accomplish his will. It is his name with lots of power. Do you read his word and pray? Joe, I have an amplified Bible from my dad. Sometimes I don't know what to pray about. Miss Holly, if you read Jehovah's word and pray, you'll be truly blessed. Joe, thank you, Miss Holly. Joe and Laura would regularly visit with Miss Holly till they moved several years later. Joe learned a whole lot from Miss Holly and her cat Bebop. As time goes on, Joe keeps reading as much as he can to stay neck to neck with Randy on the reading contest during art music class, the teacher teaches an old song, Clementine, to help the students learn some basic song structure. Oh, my darling, Clementine. Class sings. Some students really know how to sing it, others are just winging it. She talks about the history of the song, a lot of music theory going over the children's heads. A timeless classic, but it is not the top 100 songs of the day. The children don't really care as class. And she tells the students that the art and environmental contest is closing in and that the third weekend of October is the deadline. Joe and Mickey talk about what they got. Joe says he has a tall tree with some baby birds chirping in a nest being fed by a mama bird, and some zealous loggers chopping the tree down with no care if there are birds inhabiting it. Tragic story, possibly pulling at the judge's heartstrings. Mickey says he has a shoe with bubblegum on it, and how aggravating it is to get gum off your shoe. When it comes to the music, if the teacher would have used contemporary music such as Smash Mouth, Spice Girls, Will Smith, NSYNC, Backstreet, maybe the children may have learned about music theory, but she was like a gazillion years old, and the music instruction used Clementine to teach a lesson with. The results of the art contests are in. Mickey is first place as expected because he is always drawing. Joe is second with his birds, and the tree Kyle is third with something to do with bears. They will be shown in Guthrie at an award ceremony where Mickey's art will go on to the next round. Joe, that is cool, you won. What are you going to do with your $50? Mickey, buy some video games. Seen there was a sale at the store. What are you going to do with your winnings? Joe, probably rent some video games there or some new titles at Mega Movies. Kyle, I seen those. My dad probably make me save my winnings. Joe, be kind of neat to go to the reception ceremony in Guthrie. They'll probably have drinks and snacks. Who knows? Maybe Mickey will win the next round. Mickey, maybe we will see. The reception ceremony is held in Guthrie. There are snacks and drinks. People get to see the art. Mickey goes on to the next round where he does not advance. This does not quench his desire to keep drawing. He draws for the joy of it, not to win a competition. No doubt it is nice to win something. There are some activities that have intrinsic value. A lot of folk wish to be able to draw better. In order to do so, there really are no shortcuts but to draw. October passes with a regular candy costume ritual. October passes with a regular candy costume ritual. Number is look up for